and we're working as fast as we can. But designing it and getting on with it and staffing it, that's all on our plate. So we do our best with that. So as a result, very little, well, it seems big because you see it in your checking account in a way that you don't in your income tax. Property tax is actually the smaller share of what you pay throughout the year. You can take me to the next slide. Here's a demonstration of that. None of us look for a tax return. We don't want to see it. It's too scary. But in fact, if you look at those numbers, they're far greater than your property tax bill. And so that's why asking them to help us with the things that are social services that are really about redistributing wealth, what we're asking them to do is share from that 47 or 44% for the big needs that we have that are really based on income, or for many people, the lack of income that we have to help them with. So that's why it shakes down that way. The other sources of revenue that we have been able to add on to it are all outlined here by financial planning. You know, land transfer tax, you don't pay it if you're not changing houses this year. But for those that do, we say, okay, now you're in a great city, a big city with lots of needs. We're asking for an upfront investment. And so that land transfer tax is one thing that we can count on, but we gotta be very responsible about what we use it for. Because real estate markets can go up and down, can't they? The amount of help that we are getting in the city's budget from the federal and province, we added up to keep track of it, and it amounts to 23% of the total budget that you'll see in January. The user fees, that's everything right down to and including transit. We really rely on the money that you put in the fare box, but then we have to add to it. So when you get on transit, your fare pays for part of it, and the rest of the budget has to add up to $1 billion to that fare box to make it work. So not doing a fare increase puts a pressure on, but we also want to see the city moving better. And so we're willing to look at that and try to increase fares just to get people back on that transit system and hopefully out of a few cars. And lastly, property tax. Seems like a lot, but when you hear the budget in January and they say $15 billion, that's they're making me pay too much property tax. Because these other fees are layered in, the property tax, by the time you can try to collect it all, is only $5.3 billion. And that hasn't changed for a long time because it hasn't been an assessment of our property since 2016. And so adding a little bit to it, doing a little property tax increase, is really the only way to grow the pie, so to speak, or to make that column get a little taller to meet new needs. So the trick is to balance it. What can be more efficient? What can we control the costs of? And where do we need to put in some costs? Because there's something you need, something you want in your neighborhood that you think really would improve quality of life. So that's the balance that we all got to do together. And the next slide. Yes, okay. So during last year's, people said, why do you guys always talk about housing? In every neighborhood, from here all the way out to Etobicoke, out to the east end to Scarborough and downtown, everybody was focused on that. Head of Housing Committee, Councillor Perks, someone who he thought was a housing activist and should know what was going on, told him, you haven't done a single thing this year. So he sat down and he actually took his spare time and added up every time we improved someone's housing situation this year. And you heard Mayor Chow describe the many ways. It's not, sometimes it's not always, oh, they built that building and 60 people moved in. It's someone saved their roof over their head with a rent bank. Someone in an encampment, we found a rent supplement and we moved them out of an encampment, and they were still able to live an independent life, so we got them into an apartment. Some people who were in shelters moved up into a social housing unit as it became vacant. And he added up all the times we improved or put a roof over someone's head this year with what you invest in the city's budget. The number was 100,000. 100,000 times this year, someone's shelter situation was improved or became sheltered at all. So we are making progress, working together, listening to you said that's job one, and then focusing on it and saying, wherever we can pull resources to this, sounds like us, in every corner of the city, sounds like an emergency when we listen to you. And that's why the mayor never stops pressuring us to keep solving the housing situation. And 100,000 in 1 year is a pretty impressive number. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for nagging me. Okay, and you see the other priorities there too. We've talked about transit, and that's ongoing. We got to keep going. I would say the province now builds all the new stuff, so we've got to focus on making the system that exists today the best it can possibly be. The provincial New Deal that was just being negotiated as we were having this meeting last year puts money directly to transit. So together, we're making sure that province's investment in it and your investment through the city budget, making sure that it's safer. We added service hours to it and kept the fares frozen because we want to get people to re-emerge onto the system and realize, yeah, that's what people love about Toronto, that we're all a bunch of transit riders. They feel like they made a quick trip to New York just by going to downtown Toronto and seeing that's how we have this mobile city. So we're focused on that as well, and that came from you. Next slide, you go. So this is just, I'm not going to read all the way through these, but I'm going to leave that slide up while I talk about them. These are some of the ways in which we addressed some of the city's challenges with the investment that you have made this year. My favorite one is always fill 220,000 potholes. Because so much of our service is GPS and digital, and somebody's marking it into some technological unit when they get back in the truck. We actually have these numbers now. Up until a few years ago, I couldn't tell you exactly how many potholes we filled, but now someone has to type it into a system as they get back in the truck. It's 220,242. There you go. So we're tracking, and that's how we know they ask for something, are we meeting it? And if we're not making that progress, not only do we hear it from you, but if we hear it and it sounds like, that doesn't sound right, are we spinning our wheels here? We are actually more and more making sure that we have the ability to monitor and verify. And if something didn't go right, then we get down to the business of fixing it. That's why you have accountability offices and monitoring, and where a big mistake happens, you got to fix it. But now we have the data to know what needs to be fixed. So you'll go through all of those. You'll have some time on your own. And this deck, by the way, today's the kickoff presentation, but this will go up onto the city's website. Remember, anytime you go to toronto.ca, just type in City Budget 2025. And as materials become public, they all end up somewhere on that page. So if you think, oh, I want to say that to my neighbor over the back fence, that one number, and I forgot it, it's going to be up there. You'll have access to it after today. Next slide, Nico. This is the keeping people safe piece. This was a very contentious debate as we got to the end of the actual budget. We're still in pre-budget, but when council got down to brass tacks at the end, they were a little stressed. We see those high response times, average response time for police. If somebody is very dire, they're there very quickly. But on average, we saw it creeping up. And we did have a really low ratio of officers to population compared with other cities. So we invested there. We've been investing over time in fire services and paramedic. Some of it is retirement, and some of it is the growth of the city. If the city grows extremely, as we're doing now, yes, we want to make those services efficient. Yes, we want to take some tasks the police don't really need to be doing and have others do them. That's what our new, we call it our fourth first responder. That's what our Toronto Community Crisis Service is about, addressing mental health crises in a non-uniform way. That's what that's about. But the city continues to grow. So you don't necessarily see the police service shrink, even though we are spreading the services out in ways that kind of meet people's needs, and oftentimes we find they meet them in a better way. And so there's sort of cooperation going on there to spread out who does what when there's a safety crisis. And your investment allowed us to take that mental health response that we were trying out in neighborhoods. It is now citywide. So you can phone 911 and they'll help you make the determination. Do you need a couple of police officers to come or do that wellness check? Or can we send one of our agencies that we work with in Toronto Community Crisis Response? And that can happen anywhere in the city. And that was a big investment. People really liked that service and told us when we did the pre-budget in neighborhoods where it already existed. So it was part of the decision of taking 20 million and a couple of added agencies and going citywide with it. And lastly, the community service that are very local. I have framed some of my thank you notes for people where we have increased library hours. Toronto is all about its libraries, isn't it? I got a wave of hands in the back. Yeah. Right on, right on. So all of these are added things in the game. Those are operating. Those are things, once you add that service, you got to keep on offering it. People get upset once they have something when you take it away. So that there are ongoing expenses, and we listen to you to figure out where we're going to add that investment and make an investment when it's an ongoing operating cost. And next slide, I think, is going to be our CFOs. Yes, it is. He likes to brag about his multi-year journey. So I'm going to have to hand over the mic.